The atmosphere inside the Gilded Lily was suffocating. It was the kind of restaurant where the wine list didn't have prices, and the waiters moved like ghosts in tailored tuxedos. For my mother, Beatrice, this was her natural habitat. She adjusted her vintage pearls, her eyes scanning the room to ensure the city's elite noticed us at the center table. Then, she turned that cold, judgmental gaze toward me. "Elara, darling," she said, her voice loud enough to make the neighboring table of investors pause. "I saw your apartment yesterday, that studio? It's practically a storage closet in a neighborhood I wouldn't even drive through during the day. Don't you feel a shred of shame? You're 30 years old and you're living like a college student who lost her scholarship. It's an embarrassment to the Vance name." My brother, Julian, let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed against the marble walls. He adjusted his $10,000 Rolex, making sure the light from the chandelier caught the diamond on the bezel. "Don't push her too hard, Mom," he said with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Some people are just built for small spaces. Elara doesn't have the vision for the big leagues. She's happy with her little spreadsheets and her drab, little life." Julian leaned in closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "I, on the other hand, just signed the papers for the penthouse at Horizon Tower. 5,000 square feet of pure, unadulterated success. It has a private elevator and a view that makes you feel like God. Maybe I'll let you come over and clean the windows. Elara, I'll pay you more than that data entry firm pays you in a month." I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my water, feeling the cold liquid settle the fire in my chest. I looked at Julian, the golden son who had burned through millions of our father's retirement money on failed startups and sports cars. Then I looked at Beatrice, who had spent my entire childhood telling me to stay quiet so Julian could shine. They didn't know that the folder inside my bag contained the death warrant for Julian's ego. They didn't know that Horizon Tower didn't belong to some nameless investment group. It belonged to EV Global Holdings. And I was the EV. "I'm glad you liked the penthouse, Julian," I said, my voice as steady as a mountain. "Because tonight, the rent is finally due. My name is Elara, and for 30 years, I have lived in the cracks of my family's perfect facade. In the Vance household, love wasn't a feeling. It was a reward for being loud, beautiful, and expensive. Julian was the masterpiece. From the moment he was born, my parents treated him like a god who could do no wrong. I remember when I was 12. I had worked for an entire summer mowing lawns to buy a professional calculator because I loved math. When I showed it to my father, Thomas, he didn't even look up from Julian's soccer trophy. "That's nice, Elara, now go help your mother prepare Julian's victory dinner." That was the theme of my life: be useful, be silent, and don't take up space. When Julian wanted to go to an Ivy League school, my parents emptied their savings. When I wanted to go to Wharton, they told me to be realistic and go to a community college so they could afford Julian's fraternity fees. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I worked 3 jobs. I slept 4 hours a night. I graduated top of my class while Julian was busy getting suspended for partying. After graduation, I moved into that tiny studio apartment they hated so much. I stayed there for 10 years. Not because I was broke, but because I was focused. I started EV Global Holdings with $5,000 I had saved from tips. I started by buying one derelict duplex in a part of town developers hadn't noticed yet. I renovated it with my own hands at night. After my drab day job, I learned the language of bricks, mortar, and interest rates. I learned how to negotiate with contractors who tried to scam me and banks that tried to ignore me. I sold that first duplex and bought 2 more. Then a whole block. By the time I turned 28, I owned a portfolio that spanned 3 states. But I never changed my car. I never moved out of my studio. I wore the same 3 blazers to every meeting. I knew that in the world of high finance, being invisible is the ultimate leverage. While Julian was posing for Instagram and leased Ferraris, I was quietly buying the land under his feet. *6 months ago, the family dynamic shifted again. Julian announced during our monthly forced family dinner that he had achieved the ultimate status symbol. "I've moved into the penthouse at Horizon Tower," he bragged, swirling a glass of expensive cognac. "The owners are incredibly exclusive. It's a private investment group, billionaires only. They don't just look at your bank account. They look at your pedigree." They saw my potential and practically begged me to take the top floor. Beatrice had nearly fainted with pride. My father, Thomas, had clapped Julian on the back, his eyes misting over. Finally, Thomas whispered, "Vance is back where he belongs, at the top of the world." I had sat there, calmly cutting my chicken, holding back a smile. I knew exactly how Julian had secured that lease. My head of property management, Sarah, had called me months ago with a confused tone. "Boss," she had said, "we have an applicant for the penthouse. His name is Julian Vance. His credit score is a disaster. His previous business ventures are all in bankruptcy, and his references are clearly his friends from college. Should I toss the application in the trash? I had leaned back in my chair, looking at the city skyline from my office. No, Sarah, I replied, my voice cold and calculated. Approve him. But don't give him the founder's discount, charge him full market rate, plus the maximum security deposit. And Sarah, don't waive a single late fee. If he's even a minute late, I want a notice on his door for 5 months. I watched the internal reports. Julian was a nightmare tenant. He hadn't paid a single full month of rent on time. He had lied to the staff, telling the concierge he was a silent partner in the building's ownership. He threw massive, destructive parties that caused thousands of dollars in water damage to the marble floors. He even tried to intimidate the building manager when she sent him a payment reminder, threatening to have her fired by his high society connections. He was digging his own grave with a golden shovel, and I was just standing back, waiting for the right moment to let the dirt fall. He thought he was living in a palace of his own making, but he was actually living in a trap I had set months ago. He had mistaken my silence for weakness, never realizing that the person he called the basement sister was the one who signed the checks for the security guards who guarded his front door. Tonight, I was done watching. Tonight, the illusion of the golden sun was going to shatter in front of everyone. Before I revealed the moment the legal papers hit the table and Julian's world turned to ash, I want you to think about your own life. Have you ever been the person who stays quiet while others brag about things they never earned? Have you ever had your own family treat you like a second-class citizen, while you were secretly the strongest person in the room? If you've ever won a battle that nobody else could see, I want you to comment the word empire right now. Let's show the world how many quiet achievers are watching. And if you're ready to see the truth come out, hit that subscribe button for Crimson Calculus. We don't just tell stories. We provide the satisfaction you've been waiting for. Back at the table at the Gilded Lily, the insults were reaching a fever pitch. Julian was now showing everyone photos of the view from his balcony. Look at this, Mom, you can see the whole city. It makes you feel like everyone down there is just an ant. Especially people like Alara living in those little cracks in the pavement. Beatrice laughed. A high-pitched, grating sound. Oh, Julian, you're so witty. Alara, you should really take some notes. Maybe if you spent less time with your spreadsheets and more time networking, you could at least afford a doorman. I set my wine glass down. The crystal made a sharp clack against the marble table. The sound was small, but it was the sound of a hammer falling. Networking is for people who need favors, Mother, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a cold wind. I don't need favors. I own the network, Julian smirked, leaning forward. Oh, really? What network? The local library? Or maybe the discount grocery store loyalty program? Actually, I said, reaching into my leather bag and pulling out a heavy, manila folder. I was talking about EV Global Holdings. Does that name sound familiar to you, Julian? Or do you only recognize it when it's at the top of the final notice letters you've been throwing in the trash for the last 3 months? Julian's smirk didn't vanish immediately, but his eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? EV Global is a multi-billion-dollar firm. What does that have to do with you? EV stands for Alara Vance, I said, sliding the folder across the table. And I'm the landlord you've been dodging. The folder slid across the white linen tablecloth and stopped right in front of Julian's plate. For a second, no one moved. Julian looked at the folder as if it were a bomb about to go off. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he opened it. The first page was the official deed to Horizon Tower. The second was the Articles of Incorporation for EV Global Holdings, listing Alara Vance as the 100% shareholder and CEO. The third page was the one that mattered most. A formal 24-hour eviction notice, stamped by the city's high court. Julian's face went from a healthy, arrogant tan to a sickly, translucent white. He tried to speak, but only a dry, wheezing sound came out. Beatrice grabbed the papers from his hands, her eyes darting across the lines of text. This is a fake, she hissed, though her voice lacked conviction. Thomas, look at this. Alara is trying to play a prank on us. She can't own the Horizon. She's Alara. She lives in a studio. I leaned forward, my shadow stretching across the table. I live in a studio because I value privacy and low overhead, Mother. I own the Horizon because I value power. Julian, you've been telling everyone you're a silent partner. The only thing silent about you is your bank account. You haven't paid rent in 5 months. You've caused $40,000 in damages to the penthouse flooring. And you had the audacity to threaten my property manager, Sarah, telling her you'd have her fired. I turned to my father, Thomas, whose face was a mask of pure shock. Dad, the startup money you gave Julian? He didn't invest it. He used it to pay the first 6 months of rent at my building, just to look successful in front of you. He's been a squatter in my property for the last quarter, living off the Vance name. I've actually been out there building while he was burning it down. Julian finally found his voice, but it was high and cracked. You can't throw me out. We're family, Alara. You're going to put your own brother on the street over a couple of checks? It's not over the checks, Julian, I said, my voice as cold as a mountain peak. It's over the disrespect. You sat here tonight mocking the very roof over your head. You wanted to see how the other half lives? Well, tomorrow at 9 a.m., you're going to see how the homeless half lives. The locks are being changed. The security team I pay for has been instructed to escort you from the premises. Your leased furniture will be waiting for you on the sidewalk. Part 6, The Aftermath and the Final Victory. 500 words. Music, a triumphant yet somber orchestral theme builds. The dinner ended in a chaos they couldn't control. Julian stood up, his chair screeching back and hitting the floor. But no one in the restaurant came to help him. The elite friends he had been trying to impress were all staring, whispering behind their hands. The golden sun was being exposed as a fraud. In the very place he felt most invincible.